So my name is Morna Gerard and I am interviewing Tania Sammons for Georgia State University's Women's March Oral History Project. The date is December 1st, 2017 and the interview is taking place at the Georgia Historical Society in Savannah, Georgia. So first of all, can you tell me where you were born and the year that you were born?
I was born in 1968 in Dearborn, Michigan.
Well, Dearborn, Michigan's a long way from Savannah, Georgia. Can you tell me how you got here?
Yes. So both of my parents are from Kentucky, and one from Eastern Kentucky, one from Western Kentucky, and they had been part of the migration to the north to work in factories there, and so they actually met in one of the Ford factories, and they had me and my brother. My one brother, and when I was 2, we moved back to Kentucky, and I lived the rest of my life I've lived the rest of my life in Savannah, See, it makes me nervous like this. Yeah.
So
Let me try it again. So I, my parents are both from Kentucky. My mother's from Western Kentucky. My father's from Western Kentucky, and they were part of the migration north. They met in a Ford factory. Were married, had me, then one of my brothers, and when I was 2, we moved back to Kentucky. And then when I was 9, we moved to Virginia. And I managed to keep going south.
So it just gradually,
yeah.
Did they move south?
No, well, they moved to Kentucky and then to Virginia in the Appalachian Mountains. And then I went to school at the University of Kentucky. And I met my husband in Charlottesville, Virginia, where he went to school at the University of Virginia. And he and I came to Savannah together in 1993.
Why did you choose Savannah?
My husband was managing a railroad repair shop here in Savannah. And when we first came, we thought we would only be here for a few years. But we got sucked into the charm of Savannah.
It really is a lovely city. Can you describe your family's political leanings?
My mother is more conservative than my father, but they were never really politically active. My mother often didn't vote, but my father, he did vote, and I remember that he voted against the grain of his peers often, and he was, he had worked in the Ford factories in Michigan, and then when we moved to Kentucky, he worked for, he was a locomotive engineer. He worked for a train company, and so he was interested in labor issues, and he was in a union, and so I think that influenced his political point of view. And so we don't talk about politics too much, but over the years, I know that he has voted sort of against the grain, but not always. And so I remember that he voted for Jimmy Carter, and that was probably the first time that I was ever really aware of politics being discussed, and it sticks out in my mind because I remember going to school, and I was still in Kentucky at this point, going to school and learning that my friends' parents voted for Ford, and that, so I asked some questions, but I don't remember really getting. I remember asking questions and taking note of this. So my brothers are very conservative, and my youngest brother, who's 7 years younger than me, he and I were able to talk politics over the years, and both my brothers were in the military. My youngest brother was in the military for a career, but he was more moderate. And we were able to talk about politics, and we were able to talk about politics in a way that we wouldn't get angry, and we could agree to disagree when we got to those moments. But the past few years, that's not been so much the case, and I've taken issue with many of my brother's political views, and which seems to me that he has become more and more radicalized to the right. He may say the same about being to the left. I don't know, but so that's kind of where things are.
So you said to the left, so just for the record, how do you...
Where do I see
yeah,
myself?
Yeah.
It's a good point. I mean, good question, because I'm not sure. I vote democratically, although I have voted for independence, and I feel like I was to the left of Barack Obama's, where Barack Obama stands. I would have liked to have seen Bernie Sanders receive the nomination. I think he could have beat Trump. Not to say that I didn't like Hillary or don't like Hillary, and I definitely wanted her to win the presidency, but so kind of in that area.
Okay. Before the this march, were you politically active?
Not extremely, but we would put signs up in the yard, and we'd put signs on our cars, bumper stickers, and make small donations to political candidates. I didn't do, on occasion, I would make a phone call to a public official. And when I was in college, I was a little more active and worked on the campaign for Dukakis when I was in college. So a little bit, but not extreme.
Okay. And before I go on, what is your profession?
I'm a writer and curator.
Okay, what do you write?
I write about history and people and architecture and art.
Very cool.
Yes.
And what do you curate?
I curate on those same topics: fine and decorative arts, history.
Well,
So-
you're in a good place to
Yes,
you're in
definitely.
historical society. And you said you're married.
Yes.
Is your husband? Does he have similar political views to you?
Yes, we have
Okay.
similar political views. I would say he's slightly more right than I am, but we have similar political views.
And do you have any children?
We have 2 daughters,
Okay. And how old are they?
14 and 10.
Okay. So, why did you tell me you went to DC for the march?
Yes.
Why did you choose to go to DC?
That's a really good question. I felt, in many ways, I went for my daughters. I went for me too, and I went for other people. I went for people who felt like they couldn't go, and I went for people who, friends that I know, and people that I don't know who maybe don't have a voice, immigrants and people with different abilities and people with different sexual orientations. So part of me went for them too, as to stand up and make a stand, to voice, I'm not okay with this, I'm not okay with how things are. But the biggest reason was for my daughters, because I think about the future, and I think about, I don't want my daughters to look back and think that their mom didn't stand up for them, that their mom didn't stand up for the right thing to do. So that was my biggest reason, actually.
So let's take a step back and look at the night of the election.
Hmm.
Talk me through how you experienced that.
Okay. So, we were slightly nervous, but I felt confident that Hillary was going to win. And a friend of mine who was a former professor at Armstrong, Teresa Winterhalter, was having a party at her house. And so my family didn't want to go. They wanted to stay home and watch the election results at home. But I also wanted to be in this party mode as well, in celebratory atmosphere. And so I went briefly to this party for maybe about an hour, and as the results started to come in, and it was it was not looking good, and so I thought, I need to go home. And so we're watching at home with the girls, and we were going to let the girls stay up so that they would be able to see the first woman be elected to the United States, to become the United States president, the first woman. And they were excited, and they knew it was going to happen. And then it started getting later, and then it became evident to us that this might not be the case. And so it was about 10:30, and we told the girls, well, it's getting really late, and this is going to take a long time, and so we think you all need to go to, you need to go to bed now. And they, moaned, and they both were, well, wake us up as soon as you know. And so we finally went to bed before it was officially called, but we knew what the results were. And we just laid in bed and just stunned. It was a very restful night, and we talked about what this meant for our future, and it was devastating and heartbreaking, and it was a shock. And so then the next morning when we got the girls up to go to school, my husband told them, and he often teases the girls, and they often don't believe anything that he says, and so he told them that Trump won, and they didn't believe it. And so I heard them. He was up with them first, and he told them, and they didn't believe him, and he said, no, it's true. And so this kind of went on, and then the oldest one said, I'm going to ask Mom. And so she comes into the bedroom to ask me, and I come up, I get out of bed, and I come out, and I'm like, this is true, this is what happened. And so my oldest was very angry, and she was stomping around, and my youngest said, okay, where are we going? Are we moving to Canada, to France, or Malaysia? And I said, well, we're definitely not moving to Malaysia. And the reason why she chose Malaysia is said Malaysia is because she has a friend whose parents are from Malaysia, and I think that they were having conversations about moving back to Malaysia if Trump won. And then Canada, everybody had been talking about moving to Canada, and I said, we're not moving to Canada, your father hates the cold, so we're not going to Canada. I'm like, France is a possibility, maybe we'll go to France. And so that was hard, the morning after, telling my girls what happened, and everything that Trump is and stands for is not what we believe and what we teach our girls, and it's hard to try to explain to them how this man became president, and we've gone through a lot, we have talked so much about politics and electoral college, and how he didn't win the popular vote, and how many people didn't vote, and
well, and as time goes on, it's like, how do you reconcile for children the fact that somebody who behaves badly is rewarded for that, when you're trying to teach young people that honesty and kindness and all of these things are really important?
It's hard to reconcile that, and so we talk about it, but I don't think we've reconciled it. I haven't reconciled it, so I can't teach that, because I can't. I really struggle with this. One of the things that I'd gotten into this Facebook conversation before the election with one of my female cousins, and there was a little video that was being, shared around on Facebook and probably lots of different internet outlets about how, and this really isn't a political thing, it's about character, about how Obama talked about women, his wife, his daughters, and it was juxtaposed with Trump and how he talked about women, his wife, his daughter. And it's so distressing to see that. And to me, how could anyone vote for a person who speaks of half the human race in the way that he does, and think that that would be a good person to lead our country? And so I posted this, and I can't remember what I said, some comment about it. And I have a female cousin who defended Donald Trump, and I wouldn't want my daughter to date him, but he's not dating my daughter. But why would you want him to date anybody's daughter? In my mind, why would you want him to have any influence whatsoever on your daughter? Because he will have influence over her daughter, and all other daughters and women in this country in some way. And why would you ever want a person like that in charge? And not just in charge of women, but in charge of men too. He's not operating out of a point of compassion. And there was this, and I didn't get into it so much because all these people hopped in, and she could not be convinced. And it was striking to me, this woman, this is a grown woman, and how, and so that's part of this trying to reconcile, the struggle to trying to figure out how people think and what people think is okay.
Well, I do. I mean, it's like I go back to your doctors. I think it's especially difficult with people who are parents trying to explain this to their children. It's and knowing that your children have got their future lives are going to be affected by this.
Yes. I remember we had evacuated to Kentucky and Virginia. We had evacuated to Kentucky. We were staying with my brother when Hurricane Matthew came, and we were traveling with some cousins who live here in Savannah, and we were on our way back, and we had stopped at a fast food restaurant, a Wendy's, and the girls were, and they have two girls as well. Cousins have two girls, and they're the same ages as mine. And they ordered their food, and we were getting the girls situated, and the two older girls were sitting down, and there was this huge TV screen in the Wendy's, and they seated themselves so that they were right in front of this huge TV screen. And I was, and the news had come out about Donald Trump talking about how he could just how he grabbed a woman by pussy, and he could just do this, and he could just do whatever he wanted with women. And but that word pussy, and it was on the screen, and so I was getting napkins and stuff, and wasn't paying attention to what was even on the television, and I saw this look on the two older girls' faces, and I said, what's wrong? And they said, did you hear what Donald Trump said? And I looked at the screen, and I saw what it was, and I said, oh my God, I didn't want my daughters to hear that. I didn't want them, and here it is blasting on the television in a Wendy's. I had no control over that. No, and then it's like trying to explain what this meant and what, horrifying, just horrifying to have those conversations because of our president. At that point, he wasn't our president, but I don't know. Obviously, I'm not very close. I don't know what to say, really.
Well,
But I say that to them. I don't know how to reconcile
Okay.
this. I don't know what to say. I'm trying to grapple with this. We all are. Something that I would really like to see is more people on the right side of politics, Republicans, speak up, because I hear grumblings. Well, I don't really like him, but what, you know? That's something that I really need is people who I love, who I have different political views from, people I've been friends with forever, are justifying allowing this man to be in power, and I'm really struggling with that. And I say that to my daughters too.
well, I think that's good to be honest with them,
Yeah.
because I think it's important that you don't say that you don't find a way to normalize it.
Yes.
So that you can
Yes.
say this is why this is like, it's just not normal.
Yes. Yeah.
And we shouldn't, it's almost we shouldn't be able to understand why this
Yes.
is normal. So, how quickly after the election took place did you make your decision to go to Washington, D.C.?
I can't remember exactly how it was. I remember seeing something on Facebook that somebody had said, well, we should just go to, it might have been on the Pantsuit Facebook site. We should go march in DC, and then I was noticing that it was getting some traction, and then and I was thinking, oh, because I have a friend who lives in DC, and it's not that far away, and I could go stay with her. And then I got a text from a friend of mine, and I don't really remember the timeline of all this, but I got a text from a friend, and she said, can we stay with Holly? Do you think Holly would take in a group of us from Savannah? And I said, oh yeah, I'm sure she would. And I hadn't even talked to Holly yet. Holly's my best friend, and I knew that she would. So I said, yes, I'm sure she would. And then she texted right back and said, and this was my friend Natasha, and then she wrote back, can Jessica come too? And I said, yes, yes. And I still haven't talked with Holly. And then she texted back a few minutes later, okay, we've got our plane tickets. I'm like, what? Okay, I need to, and she said, and she gave me another list of names of people who might want to stay there. And Holly and I have two very good friends here in Savannah, and I said, well, I better get with them right away because we need to get a spot for them. And so I texted them, Ann and Ashley, and then I had like a whole list of possible people staying at Holly's house before I actually called up Holly. And I'm like, Holly, just so you know, there's a whole group of women coming from Savannah who's going to be staying at your house for the march. And she said, okay. And so we did, and it was a lot of fun. And I can share with you a picture, I'll have to send it
That's
to
great.
you, of us all standing in front of her house right before we left for the march with our signs.
So, how many of you stayed with Holly?
I'd have to go back and take a look, but I think there was about a dozen of us. And
how big a house does she have?
she has, it's a, let's see, four bedroom, 2-bath house, but she has a basement. And so we were everywhere. We were on blow up mattresses, and, we were sharing beds, and somebody slept on a couch, and actually multiple people slept on couches, and her son was booted to a couch, and and her daughter. And so it was a festive gathering.
Did you all fly up?
We went in different ways. So I drove, and Ann and Ashley drove with me, and another friend drove up with us, and then that friend ended up continuing on to go. She had to go visit a family member in Philadelphia, and then she, I think, flew back from there later. And then other people flew up. Some people took the train, the overnight train. But in our particular group, most everybody flew, and except for a small group of us who drove it. No, there was a couple who came from the Atlanta area. Anne's two sisters drove from the Atlanta area.
So what day did you leave?
Oh, I don't know. I need my calendar to look. Let's see. So the march was on Saturday. We left on a Friday morning.
Okay.
And we had our big meal at Holly's house that night, and then we marched the next day.
When you were driving up, what was the mood like in the car?
It was all over the place, but it was, but there was a sense of excitement and, but also a bit of nervous anticipation because we didn't know what sort of counter protests there might be because there had been. We were getting word about that at the inauguration events, and so there was some concern, about the safety. And that night, as we were preparing dinner and preparing to march the next day, we were doing things like we would take a pen, permanent marker, and we'd write our name and phone numbers on our arms, emergency numbers, the ACLU number, in case something happens, because we didn't know.
So was that the night where you all sat?
Yes.
Do you want to talk about
Sure.
this?
So the night we all gathered, and we came in different ways, flying and driving, and Natasha, who's an amazing cook. Her business she has a bakery, a squad bake shop, but she's also a great cook, and she wanted to cook, and so everybody was doing something. I was organizing Holly and trying to get people to connect, not just Holly, but like organizing everybody staying at Holly's, and helping with that. And Natasha said, "Well, I will cook a meal. I'll make a meal for dinner on Friday." And so other people who arrived earlier on Friday, they all went to the grocery store and bought up food for the evening meal, and then we sat around the table. But the whole time things were happening. So we had Scott Stanton Panhandle Slim signs, and so we decided we wanted to somebody had the idea, we should put a string around it so that we can just hang it on our neck. And so people were doing that, and some people were finishing up their pussy hats, and some other people were making other signs, and there was all this activity and buzz, and there's cooking in the kitchen, setting the table, all this stuff was going on, marking up our arms, all this preparation. And so we finally sat down together at the table. I read a passage from a letter that was written by a woman named Charlotte Teller to her friend Mary Haskell, and in 1912, in May of 1912, and I'm writing a book about Mary Haskell, who was the patron of Khalil Gibran and who wrote The Prophet, but she was the patron of many others, including Charlotte Teller, who was a writer as well. And Charlotte was in a suffrage march in New York City in May of 1912. And she wrote to Mary about it, and I'd like to read it.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is Charlotte Teller to Mary Haskell, May 7, 1912. I walked in the parade from beginning to end, Washington Square to 57th Street. So did Allen and all the rest. And what a wonderful experience. And what an enormous and intelligent crowd as filled Fifth Avenue to watch us. It has done a great deal to give suffrage dignity. Rouhani telephoned to say that he was won at last. Many wept so that they couldn't tell why. Miss Lilpseek and I never let go of hands from the time we started. How we loved each other and the whole world. I lived the French Revolution, and all the class struggles over. And even though I was in Mrs. Belmont's funny misfit division.
That's great.
Yeah, and so you know, you can capture. You know, she's got exclamation points, and she has some things underlined, and you know, the fact that they were holding hands, and you can just get this sense of camaraderie that was felt in this march. But I could feel it when I read it the first time I read it, and that night when I was reading it at dinner. But this letter means so much more to me now after going through the march.
Yeah.
I can totally understand that excitement that she felt, and how people were crying, you know, this emotion that it's hard to explain. It was a feeling, a sensation for me that I've never experienced before. I don't think I ever will again.
I think for a lot of us that was the case. Well, let's talk about. We'll get to the emotions in the actual march in a second.
Okay.
But let's talk about, you get up in the morning
Mm-hmm.
for the day of the march. Talk about your journey into
Okay.
the rallying point.
Okay. The morning is kind of a blur. I'm not really a morning person. But what we ended up doing was driving 2 cars. I drove. That was another reason why I drove, because I knew that we were going to have to do some driving while we were up there. And I have a van, and Holly has a van. So Holly drove a carload, and I drove a carload, and we drove to the nearest metro station, which is the Vienna station. And we arrived, we park our cars, and there's this huge line of people to get their tickets to get on the subway. And that, you know, ratcheted up the excitement immediately. We were stunned by all the people that we saw, and we couldn't park. We had to park far away from the actual, and walk through a neighborhood to get to the subway station. And but Holly had gotten tickets ahead of time, so we were able to just go right in. We didn't have to stand in line for the tickets, which was exciting. I remember somebody was there passing out kind bars, which I thought was a very interesting marketing tool on that particular day. But the other thing that I remember that was really fun was, here is, you know, like a dozen women walking together with these signs made by Panhandle Slim, with all different quotes by different women, and people loved it. We would just stand for people so that they could take pictures, and then we would walk, you know, maybe 100 yards, and then somebody else would say, "Oh, can I take a picture?" And then you'd stop, and then all these other people were taking it, and we would just stand there with our signs. Which was kind of fun.
I think everyone knew what the Savannah women looked like, because they had. Well, since we're talking about the signs, do you want to pull yours up so we can get it here, and tell me, because I actually talked to Scott this morning.
Yes.
And he said he made a lot of the signs, and then some people asked him for very specific signs,
yes.
and you were one of the folks who asked for a specific sign.
Yeah.
Can you talk about this?
So you had asked earlier, why did I go on the march? And I gave you several reasons. The big one was my daughters. But another reason that I went on this march was to honor the women who've come before us. And one of the women in particular is Mary Haskell, and she is a woman who I'm writing a book about, the patron of Khalil Gibran, who wrote The Prophet. That's the big thing she did in her life, but she did lots of other amazing things, and she was a women's suffrage, or fought for women's suffrage, spoke out on women's suffrage, as did her protege, Charlotte Teller, whose letter I read from. And this was a quote that she had written in her diary when she was a freshman at Wellesley College. And I wanted to capture that because she had set out for herself in 1894 the goal to make or mar the cosmos. And she did that, you know, through her support of many people, and then the work and support that she did with Khalil Gibran has impacted the world. His book has been translated into 100 different languages, and has never gone out of print since it was published in 1923. So she did that. And, but the empowerment of women was very much a part of what she did. She had a girls' school, and she supported other women in their creative and intellectual pursuits. So I wanted to carry her with me in some form or fashion, and so I asked Scott, and I gave him this particular quote, and this was the sign that I carried.
So were you thrilled when you saw the sign for the first time?
Yes, yeah, I was. It was very exciting, and actually, well, yeah, Scott made a mistake when he first he spelled. So I sent him the message, but he spelled, so it's heat. And so, and this isn't like the normal language that we normally use. And people got, and as I was carrying around, people were stumbled on it a little bit. You know, who uses the word heed, and who says to make or mar the cosmos. It threw people off a little bit, but I kind of liked that too. And this was a quote to herself. This is her in her journal. "Oh woman, take heed." She's saying this to herself. But Scott had written head instead of heed, and but I didn't have it in time for him to correct it before, so I went to the march with it saying head, and then after I got back, he corrected it.
Yeah, he told me he was working right up until people.
Oh my gosh, he was it was amazing what he did. Truly a true feat what he accomplished. Yeah.
Do you remember when did you first get word that he was willing to do all of this?
Well, I'm friends with Scott on Facebook, and our kids go to the same school here, so pretty early on. So pretty early on. And I was, you know, I tried to do my part in you know, donating money to him and exchanging. I picked some up and exchanged, and oh, one other thing I should say about, can I put, should I put this in? Before we left, the week before we left, I had probably about 20 women over to my house to talk about the march and to hear from each other. How were we getting there? What were our plans? You know, how do people feel about it? Was anybody nervous? Like what? And so we had this little powwow session of about 20 people, and Scott came for that powwow session.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you all got your really colourful, amazing signs.
Mm-hmm.
Like you tell me about getting on the train.
Okay, so we get to the train. So we finally get on the train, and it's cram packed, which was really exciting to see all these people. We were just stunned by the number of people who were on the train. I mean, we were packed in like sardines on a Saturday in DC, which I've been on the metro on a Saturday in DC, and it's not packed. And so it was fun riding in. You know, you could feel this. There's still a little bit of nervous energy and anticipation, but it's feeling more not just celebratory and festive, but like I felt, and I started to feel this. I started to feel, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Like you can read in the paper that, and you know that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. You know that millions and millions of people voted the way you did, and have some general view of the world the way you do. But you don't always see that every day. And for the first time in my life, suddenly I was surrounded by, I knew that all the people around me had similar points of view to me. And that was really kind of wild and exhilarating. And so, and it intensified as the day went on. So it began on the train where there were all these people, because we didn't know how many people were going to be there. I mean, there was beginning to be this buzz closer to the march. It looks like we're going to have a good showing. But I don't think clearly nobody knew how many people were going to show up that day. I mean, it was obvious because things sort of broke down. There were just so many people, and that was great. That was really incredible. And then we get there, and we had the general snafus that happens when you have a huge group of people trying to connect. And so my friend Anne and her sisters, they come from a large family, and they had other people that they were trying to meet up, and so we were trying to meet up with them. And then we had two people who really desperately wanted to get coffee, and so they went into one of the museums to get coffee, and we had to wait for them, and there was this huge line in there, so it took them forever to come out. And inevitably we ended up getting separated from some of the people, and but we were able to connect with most of the people that we were trying to connect, all the different people we're trying to connect with. And so we entered the mall by the National Gallery, which I'm not sure what side that's on.
Yeah.
It's opposite from the Native American Museum. Okay. And we got word that our Georgia people, our Savannah people, were over by the Native American Museum. Well, this was a huge feat to get from this side of the mall to this side of the mall. But we did it, and we swam through the people, and it was really kind of like swimming at some points. You're incredibly close to people. But everybody was so nice and polite, and it was, people would part for you, and if you stepped on somebody's foot, you would say, "I'm sorry," and they're like, "Oh, don't worry, it's okay." And a couple times, somebody fell, or there was some issue, and the crowd would sort of make way for the person who fell, or whatever the situation was. There was one area where somebody had some medical problem. A woman said, "I'm a doctor." They part so she can get in, and then she somehow lost her child. She had her child with her. The doctor had her child with her while she goes to help this woman, and then she realizes that she had lost her child. She's like, "Oh, that's my child!" And so there's this, is there a child? Where we're yelling, and they find the child, and then it parts to get the child connected to the doctor. Who it was those little things that were just so nice and wonderful. Yeah. Throughout the day.
Was there a point where you realised this is, we thought it was going to be big, but a point where you realised like this is way, way bigger than anything anyone expected?
I'm not sure exactly when that hit. I mean, pretty early on, right as we were coming onto the mall, I think. Excuse me. Right as we were coming onto the mall, and you saw the sea of people, you knew, and it was just, you just couldn't believe it. Wow. And it was also really wonderful too, because we had seen pictures of the mall from the day before at the inauguration, and it was so exciting to see that there were so many more people there on Saturday than there were on Friday.
So you all had like awesome signs, but when you were looking around, were there any other signs
Oh
that
my gosh,
you
the
liked?
signs! Yeah, I don't know if I can tell you any specific ones, but there were some really great ones. I loved seeing all the posts after the march, and all the different signs that there were, and all the different signs that we saw along the way. And probably my favorites after Scott's were the signs related to Harry Potter, and how something like Dumbledore would not approve of this. All different sorts of Harry Potter referenced, and I've, in this really kind of funny, bizarre way, or maybe not so much, this whole, everything that's really happened in the past year and a half, I find these parallels to Harry Potter, and it's very much in my mind because my youngest daughter has listens to Harry Potter on a book on tape, and she carries around her tablet listening to Harry Potter constantly. Harry Potter is always in the background of our lives. She goes to sleep listening to Harry Potter. When she's cleaning her room, she listens to Harry Potter. When she just carries around the Harry, and she's lost track of the number of times that she's listening. And when she gets through all the books, she starts it all the way over again. And so you hear these different parts of the book, and I've read the whole series, but a long time ago, and so now I'm hearing it, and there are parts of it that just ring true to things that are happening now, and so obviously other people saw that connection as well, and so I love those.
What about chants?
What about
the chants? Were you willing to chant along with the?
Oh yeah. There wasn't. It wasn't like a constant chant, but there were moments where suddenly we were chanting, and I was all into it. And I remember one part in particular. It was after the march was over, the presentations, the speeches,
the rally bit.
and we were walking along. I forget what street it is, but it's on the. I don't know my directions of the mall, but it's closer to the Capitol side, along where the Native American Museum is, going back towards the National Gallery, but on the street. We were on the street, and people were chanting then, and that's when I felt, because before we were just standing, we were weaving through people, we were standing there, and that's when we were actually moving. And so I really thought, going into it, that it was going to be a march, that we were going from one place to the other, and there were just too many people to do that. And so then afterwards, after the rally, they were saying that they weren't going to do the march, and then some people said yes, they are, and so I think that there were multiple marches going on at different places, and so we were on that road in front of the Capitol, and we were marching there and chanting. So.
Is there any chance that you remember that you?
No, I can't. I don't remember.
You'll be lying in bed tonight and you'll remember.
Yes, I will. And what I do remember is that Jessica Lebos, who was with us in our group, she did a live Facebook feed while we were chanting in one of them, and she was just, over the top, excited, and couldn't believe it, and she was, filming, us chanting. Maybe one will come to me in a minute.
So when you're in this huge crowd of people and you look around, who was represented in terms of age, gender, identity?
Everybody. We saw everybody. And that was one of the things that was really exciting too. And there were some children. There weren't a lot of children, but there were some children, and I admired the people who were brave enough to bring out their children. I was not brave enough to do that. And so I carried a scarf that my daughters made for me at Christmas. I wore that scarf in their honor. And men. I liked seeing men there. I estimated, I can't remember, I'm sure I've read about this someplace, but I estimated there were maybe like 25% men. But I was happy to see men marching. It was predominantly white, but there were African Americans and people of every different ethnic background. Different sexual orientations, and you know that because people had a sign or had a t-shirt or something that indicated that they were of different sexual orientation, and so everybody was there. Everyone was represented.
Did you see any counter protesters?
No. Mm-mm. And we talked to a few police officers, and they said it was less tense than the day before. And so that we thought that was interesting. We did hear about there was some counter protesting in front of Trump Tower and or not Trump Tower, the post office, the Trump Hotel, whatever it's called. And but we didn't go there. I personally didn't want to go there. And we saw some police heading in that direction. So there were, and then I heard later that there was some counter protests there. And then we went to, oh, my friends are going to kill me for not remembering the name of this place. An Irish pub. We went to an Irish pub afterwards. And I met up with my friend Martha, who lives in New York City, a childhood friend, and she joined us and had dinner with us at the pub. And but it was great because at the pub, everybody who was at the pub were people who had been marching, and and it still continued on with here was an entire day that was completely filled with millions of people who strangers, people you didn't know, some who you knew, but mostly people you didn't know, who you knew had a similar political or worldview that you had. And so you just automatically went into conversation, which was really wonderful. And so that continued on at the pub.
That's great.
So, yeah.
Now, you wore a pussy hat.
Yes.
What did you think about all of the pussy hats?
I thought it was very clever, and it made a statement. I love art, and I study art, and I love how art was employed to create a protest in a very big, grand way. How awesome! Yeah.
Who gave you did you knit yours or did somebody give you your?
My friend Anne made it and gave it to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're at the pub.
Yes.
Then did you go back to your friend's house for that night?
Yes. So we stayed at the pub for a while, and then we walked around. We walked by the Capitol, back to the metro, and it was kind of late. And it was as we were walking, we walked a good bit, and it was a foggy, sort of misty night, and the Capitol. We walked right by the Capitol, and it was filled with there was this mysterious, not creepy, but mysterious and beautiful mist and fog around the Capitol. That was really lovely. That stands out in my mind as we were walking back to the metro. And when we got on the metro, it was totally different from the ride in because it was fairly late at this point, and there was hardly anybody on the metro. And then we were exhausted, and we had to walk through the parking lot at the metro station, and then through this neighborhood, and then we couldn't remember exactly where we parked, and we had walked around a little bit until we finally get to the car.
So you stayed overnight, I guess.
Yes.
And then when did you leave the next morning?
No, Ashley and I stayed until Monday.
Okay.
But two people left on Saturday, one person during and one person after the march. And then everybody else left on Sunday, and then Ashley, Ann, and I stayed until Monday. And so on Sunday night, we had dinner with the O'Brien clan, so the other people in town who were family and relatives in town related to the O'Brien clan. And so we had another really nice, wonderful dinner with them. But the morning after, on Sunday morning, that was, well, when we got home on Saturday night, we all took showers and I think we got pizza. And we sat around and we were watching, talking about our experience for the day. And the rally was being aired, I think on C-SPAN maybe. And so we were watching the rally on television and talking and, sort of reliving the day. All of us feeling very, very high and elevated from the experience. And then the next morning, the press, reading, seeing, and then that's when we learned about the marches. Well, we had heard about it a little bit on Saturday, but on Sunday, seeing all the press about the marches around the world, and that was incredible. All the people who turned out around the world, and it was so exciting to see all that. And somebody had gone out and gotten several newspapers, and we were passing newspapers around the table at breakfast, and we had run into a reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and he interviewed some of us, and some of us were quoted in his piece, and so that showed. We didn't have the paper copy, but we saw it online. Jessica and I were quoted. I think one other person was quoted in that article as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Did you see any other media? Like, did you look at Fox News or anything like that?
I'm sorry?
Did you watch Fox News or any of the other channels?
I remember watching Fox News. I tried to avoid Fox News. My husband watches it on occasion to sort of get the bigger picture, but I can only take it in small doses.
So, what was, compared to the mood in the car on the way up to the march, what was the mood like on the way home?
It was calm and dialogue full. We talked the entire way. It was, and it was almost kind of, it was like a release, because we've been through it, and there wasn't that nervous energy about going into it. But then, also somber, I would say, because, this was an incredible experience of solidarity and coming together and making a stand and voicing our view. But the reality was that here's this guy who's president and a majority Republican Congress, and it's going to be a long haul. And so we talked about that, and so there were somber moments on the ride home too.
Was there anything that surprised you at the march that you hadn't expected?
I think there were lots of surprises. I had expectations of a march, and it wasn't exactly that. It was more like a rally just because of how many people. I was surprised by how many people were there. I was happily surprised that there weren't counter-protesters, or at least that I saw or encountered, and even the ones that were, it wasn't bad. What else? I don't know if I would say I was surprised, but I was unexpected. It was unexpected the way that I felt that day. And it's something that I almost can't explain. I felt big. I felt, solidarity. I've used that word a lot. I felt connected and empowered. And that was incredible, and that was unexpected.
Did you cry at all?
I'm trying to think. If I did cry, I felt emotional. I don't think that I cried, although I feel like I cry right now. I don't think I did. I don't think I did.
So, you get back home.
Yeah.
When you get back to, reality, obviously your husband is supportive of the fact that you're going. Were you able to talk to the people you work with, other friends and family, about your experiences?
Yeah. Yes. And of course I wanted to share with my girls, and they wanted to know. My niece was living with us at the time, and she wanted to know. I wanted to take her with me. And I technically could have. She was 18, but her father didn't want her to. And I just said, let's just let this be. And when you're on your own, you can go to your marches. I didn't want to get involved in that. So they wanted to know about it, and so I shared with them. But yeah, we talked. But I didn't talk about it with my brother. He didn't ask, and I didn't volunteer. Same with my parents. My parents didn't ask, and I didn't volunteer. And so that's kind of where I am now with trying to think about how can we get beyond, and I don't know if reconcile is the right word, but how can we get beyond, how can we get to a place where we really have a conversation? Because we have to have conversations. And that, that includes some soul searching and, and how to get beyond feeling entrenched, I feel like we have to give the other side, and it's a side thing, a way to voice their displeasure without pointing fingers and making people feel bad about themselves. And I'm not saying that I'm very good at that. In fact, I don't think that I am really good at that. But I'm trying to think about it. I'm trying to. I do better with non-family members.
We're at now. This is December 1st, so we're over 10 months since the inauguration. What do you think of this administration's activities and behaviour since the election?
It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And, I have these moments, we're almost a year in, and I have these moments where I'm listening to the radio. I don't watch too much TV. I'll have these moments watching TV too, but mostly it's on the radio. And I'll have these moments when I hear Trump's voice and just hear things that he says, and I'm just I'll just be stunned, like, oh my God, he's our president. How can he be our president? And I just have to sit with that for a minute. It's this weird phenomenon, I've never experienced that with anybody else. And I remember having moments when George W. Bush was president, and I'd hear him speak on the radio, and I'd have to change the channel, or I'd get really frustrated, and it was nothing. It's nothing compared to that. And then, and George Bush has come forward and said things, and then I've had these warm, fuzzy feelings for George Bush, and I'm like, what is going on? It's, how did this happen? And this is part of what, I'm saying about the other side. We need to hear more people like George Bush speaking up. This is not okay what Donald Trump is doing. And the Republicans who are supporting him in Congress. I'm horrified at what they are doing.
Yeah.
It is just horrifying. And it doesn't look like it's going anywhere good. And it seems like it keeps getting worse. And this whole tax bill is just horrific. And so many people are going to be hurt by this if it passes. And I just don't understand how people can live with that. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Why people think that this is okay. I get how there are tactics to convince people that this is to their benefit when it's really not, and how they are able to dupe people. But the people in power, like, what? I just can't wrap my brain around it.
I'm the same.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of people very active since the march, writing letters or postcards, calling their representatives, being parts of the indivisible groups. Did you take part in any of this stuff?
I have definitely been more active than I've ever been in terms of calling political officials. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've actually written. I think I've
Okay.
made the phone calls, but not even as much as I would like to. And so this is the really hard part, I think. We all have lives, you know. We have jobs, and we have children, and we have family and obligations, and they count on that too. They, you know, the Republicans in power, they count on people not having the time to really, and that's kind of how we've gotten to the point where we are, I think, is that we've just kind of been lulled into everything is fine, and obviously it's not fine, and it hasn't been fine, and it hasn't been fine for a lot of people for a long time, and I think for a lot of us we have realized that more now. But more of us need to realize that. So yes, I'm more active, not as much as I would like to. I'm not quite sure what more I can do. I feel like this is important. I feel like raising my daughters, and, you know, sharing with them my views, I think that's important in the next generation. They're way more tuned in to what's going on than I ever was.
Does that not give you faith that this younger generation seems to be, like, a lot more aware than...
In some ways it does, and in some ways, you know, so, you know, I think about lots of different things that sort of give me hope for the future. You know, for one thing, race relations, you know, it's especially, well, I don't know if it's especially evident in the South, and it's not in the North, because I think that the North is fairly segregated as well. Not quite as much, but they definitely have segregation issues that maybe they're not quite willing to think about or address. But I in watching my daughters, they're much more integrated with people of different backgrounds and races, and I don't know how much of it is my husband's influence or I think it's a combination, but also of their experiences in school, and so I'm hopeful about that, and so that translates over into politics, and so I feel, in some ways, I feel very hopeful about that. But there's this other part of me that now sort of questions my beliefs about that, because I kind of thought that we were there. Certainly not totally there, but I thought we were much, much closer to being a more integrated society across, you know, race and openness with regard to people of different sexual orientations and people who have different abilities, people from different origins, immigrants. I thought we were much closer to being a fully integrated, open community nation than clearly we are. So yes, I'm hopeful, but I feel I'm stunned by this too.
Continue with the hopeful thing. We have midterm election next year.
Yes.
So within the year leading up to that, in terms of politics or this administration, do you have any? What do you hope will happen?
Well, I hope that there's a lot of turnover in from Republican to Democrat. I was extremely excited about what happened in Virginia. I've lived in Virginia for much of my life, and I have many friends who still live in Virginia, and so I'm a little more aware of what's going on in that state politically and in general. And so I was following along, not really close, but sort of loosely, and I paid attention on election day, and I was very excited about what happened, and that is very encouraging to me for the midterm elections. So I'm hopeful about that. But I also have some concerns too, because there's a lot of sort of piggybacking on what happened with the Democratic National Committee and with Bernie Sanders. I don't think that's resolved, and so that is of concern about internal, and it makes me wonder, because the Republicans have their own issues with internal views of where things are going, and we just seem to be so entrenched with the two-party system, and it almost feels like there needs to be other parties. But I don't know how. I at least can't see how that can play out in this country. Maybe it can, maybe it will, I don't know. But
a lot of upheaval in order for that to happen.
Yes, yeah.
If somebody was going to plan to go to a march in the future, what would your advice be to them?
Wear comfortable shoes. Make sure that you're dressed appropriately. I was really, really worried that I was not quite dressed warm enough in case it was going to be really cold. Unfortunately, it wasn't very cold, and so that was fine. I did go out and buy special hiking boots before I went, and I was so glad that I did. I was fine after standing up all day long, and some of my friends were not. I don't feel that we were quite. I had a copy of the map, and we sort of did a periphery overview of where we were. We did have some discussions, like if something goes wrong, finding meeting places. So I think having some kind of plan the night before, I think that would be good. Take water.
But not too much.
But not too much. Yes, because then you have to find a place to go to the bathroom, which is an ordeal with that many people. Take your camera.
Did you take pictures?
I did take pictures. Not as much as now. I wish that I had, but I was with people who took a lot of pictures, and so Clint had some really great pictures.
He's donated,
Yeah.
Would you be willing to share them with the archives?
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah, I'll have to go back and see the few pictures that I have.
That would be great. Before I finish, I want you to talk about because there's after everybody got back to Savannah, you had an event here.
Oh, yes.
Could you talk about that event?
Yeah, there was a program at Trinity Methodist Church on Telfair Square where I think it was 21 women, but it might have been more, who spoke about their experience. And I think we had 2 to 5 minutes, I can't remember, but a very short time to speak because there were so many of us. And we just gathered at the church, and we shared our experiences, and it was quite a range, and so the people who, I think there were around 300 women from Savannah who went to the march, and the word just went out. Would anybody like to share? Would anybody? And so I think that there were 21 women who spoke, and one of the things that I really loved about that, for one thing, it was very exciting for me to have my daughters and my niece at that event, to hear from all the different voices and all the different experiences, so that they could really kind of get an idea of what it was like, even though they weren't there. And there were pictures that were displayed on the wall throughout the whole thing, the whole event, the whole presentation, and everybody brought their Panhandle Slam signs, and those were all around the church. And it was an incredibly powerful night, and it ended with the song. Many of the women, well, everybody sang, but it was led by a group of women, J.J. Collins and another group, and a group of women who could sing, who have beautiful voices, at the front of the church, singing the song that became very popular. I forget the title of it.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so it was a very amazing, powerful evening.
That's great.
Yeah.
Is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to talk about?
No. Well, I'm curious to know, like, how is this going to be? I'm wondering if I should read my speech.
Do you want to do that?
It's not that long.
No, that's fine. And this will go into the collection.
Okay. I marched in Washington, D.C. I didn't feel like I was protesting. I was taking a stand, making a statement, being present. My heart felt big in ways I've never experienced. I marched for my daughters and my niece. I marched for my husband, who wasn't with me because he was at home with the girls. I marched for my friends of different abilities and colors and sexual orientation. I marched in honor of the women who marched for us. I marched for justice. I marched for freedom. I marched for me. As I swam through the sea of people in the middle of the National Mall between the National Gallery and the National Museum of the American Indian, I fully realized the term solidarity. While carrying our Panhandle Slam paintings, my friends and I peacefully squeezed our way through the crowd, apologizing for getting uncomfortably close to those around us, and pausing for photos of our signs. Slowly we inched forward, moving towards our fellow Savannahans on the other side. Though we sought our Georgia pals, we felt at home with the crowd. We smiled, laughed, hugged, cried, and chanted with strangers. These were our people. Women, men, and children. Brown, black, tan, and white-skinned people. People with many differences and points of view, all standing or sitting together for human rights. The march was a gathering about liberty and justice for all. Solidarity. Why did that moment solidify that term for me? I suddenly realized the contrast of isolation and alienation I had been feeling, and now I understand that I've had this feeling for a long time, much of my life. I've felt voiceless, isolated, and alienated by boys and men who would not allow me to play with them, by parents and family who encouraged me to act more like a girl, and by mean girls and women who didn't appreciate my successes and differences. Don't get me wrong, I have a voice and I use it. But when I voice my injustices and disagree with the status quo, I get shut out. No, you cannot play on a baseball team. No, I will not support you getting an education. No, you cannot succeed without my approval. If you do not do what you are told, you will suffer. The stakes are high. I have learned that there are immediate and painful consequences when I speak up, but I have no regrets. I do not regret speaking truth to power, which has resulted in losses of parents, family, friends, and employers. And now my government, which threatens my rights and freedom and those of people I know and love. This march empowered me and us. I will continue to speak up to the current power structure, and I relish the opportunity to do so with you amazing people.
That's great.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great way to finish. Well, I'll talk to you about what's going to happen once we get
Okay.
off of this.
Okay.
But for now, I want to thank you because this has been a joy to sort of talk to you about your experiences.
Thank
I'm
you.
very grateful. You and your Savannah cohorts have really been quite remarkable in the sense of community, and I think having your signs has been a really good
Yeah.
kind of unifying
Yes.
piece in all of that.
Yeah.
So it's been great to be able to document some of your sort of March experiences. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.